I normally like to talk about little micro strategies when it comes to marketing for record labels, but today I want to go big picture. I want to zoom out to 50,000 feet and I want to look at 5 macro strategies that I think will help you grow your record label and promote your new releases. Number 1 is different artists have different needs. So we shouldn't apply the same marketing template to all of the artists on our record label. It's easier, I understand that. And of course, there's exceptions when it comes to administrative things and things that we do for every release. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the creative marketing strategies that we have for our artists. Of course, we can try to replicate some of them, but I think it's more important that we cater specifically to the needs and expectations of each artist for each release. So how we do this is we ask the artists what their expectations are. Be really specific. In fact, I like to take them out for coffee and really just sit down and think through things and ask, what are their financial expectations for this project? Maybe they need to break even on all their recording expenses. Maybe they have a full-time job and they don't care. They don't need money at all. Maybe they just want to make rent and that rent is $2,000 a month. And so that's what they need out of their music career. It's important to ask about artistic expectations as well. Why are they doing this? What do they hope to accomplish? What are some of their more artistic and ephemeral goals? And try something new for each release. Make it a little goal that you try or you tap into one new source or one new idea for every new release and get experimental and cater to what the release is asking for. So if you think this release could do well at college radio, then try to launch a college radio campaign specifically just for this release or do something you've never done before. If you think this single that you're releasing might do really well with Instagram influencers, so maybe pitch or pay a few Instagram influencers to promote this single. It can be something that you've never tried before, something a little outside the box, but make a plan, make a commitment for each new release to try something new that's really catered really specifically to that specific release. And also understand that there isn't unnecessarily the compounding of opportunities. And so opportunities you've had for previous releases won't necessarily carry over to this new release. I had an incredible opportunity many years ago in 2015 where we released a record, it was featured on Bandcamp, and then a couple months later, this company reached out to us and asked us if they could press vinyl for it. It had only been a digital release. And so they asked us if they could have the exclusive rights to release vinyl. They were going to pay for the whole thing. They were going to give us $1,000 licensing fee. And then they were going to give us 100 free copies to sell ourselves. It was an incredible deal. It was like a once in a lifetime thing. But I thought that this was like a new contact that I had established. I thought this was a new opportunity I was going to have for my record label moving forward across the board. And so my next release was 4 months later. And I was like, great, we have a company that's going to press vinyl for us. And I totally was expecting that to happen. And they didn't respond to that album. They didn't really get back to me. And so I didn't have that contact moving forward. It was still a great opportunity, but I was kind of naive to think that every opportunity that you get on a certain release will carry over to the next opportunity. Sometimes it does. Sometimes you make relationships that last forever. But just because a blogger is writing about 75% of your releases doesn't mean they're going to love and write about 100% of your releases. Before we move on to number 2, I just want to let you know, if you can take notes if you want, but I'm compiling everything that I'm talking about today on my website at otherrecordlabels.com/marketing. And there you can listen to this podcast episode. You can get all of the notes from today's episode, and you can download my free marketing checklist. So go to otherrecordlabels.com/marketing. Number 2, keep being creative. Keep releasing new music as a record label. Encourage your artist to be prolific, but more importantly, enable your artists to be more prolific. Does that mean paying for them to go to retreat with the band or with some other songwriters to write music in between album cycles? Does that mean booking a studio for the weekend for them just to go and make demos and to be creative? It's really important that as a record label, you are enabling creativity, but not just from your artists, also from yourself as a record label. Experiment with new ideas like we talked about in the previous example. Experiment with different genres, with different formats. Have you ever released on CD before? Have you ever released on vinyl or cassette? Have you ever done a digital only release? Experiment, see what your fans respond to. You might think, hey, my fans don't like this, but if you don't try it, you won't know for sure. And as you experiment, as you be creative, as you model the creativity of your artists as a record label, keep track of everything that you do. Keep track of all of your initiatives and write down what has worked, how much sales it brought in, how much engagement, what positives came from it. Do a debrief after the album campaign and say, okay, here are the 20 marketing things that we did. Make a spreadsheet, 20 marketing things we did. Here are the pros. Here are the cons. Here's how much it cost us. Here's how much money it made. And then the final column is, would we do it again? Yes or no? So keep track of everything you do. As you're being experimental and creative as a record label with your marketing promotions, you need to measure everything so that you know what to repeat and what to abandon. Number 3, don't copy or recycle major label strategies. Ask yourself, why are we doing what we're doing? Are these just traditions that you don't know the origins of? What is the objective of the things we're doing? What is the tangible objective of pre-release singles? What is the tangible objective of pre-orders? Why vinyl? These aren't all bad things, of course not. But it is a bad thing if you don't have any idea of why you're doing it or what your ideal outcome is. That's bad business. I'm actually really drawn to and attracted to the labels in our community and that we've had on the show who abandon things like having their artists tour exhaustively or overpaying for major studios, or maybe abandoning the idea of albums altogether and focusing on smaller EPs or more affordable singles. I love labels who are experimental like that and who abandon some of the more traditional things. They're not inherently bad. I'm not saying that, but it's really important that for each release and for each artist and for every record label, you look at these things that we do that we think we should be doing and question why we're doing it. Now, let's go back to one of the previous examples that I had. So let's say if it's running a pre-order, where did pre-orders came from? Well, pre-orders came from this idea of front-loading sales for SoundScan. So if you had a fan show up in a record store and they saw that they could pre-order a record from Radiohead and they would get a tote bag or a sticker or be entered into a contest to meet the band, they would buy the album. They'd give $20. The store would write their name down. They wouldn't get anything except for maybe a giveaway or something. Well, all of those sales in the weeks and months leading up to release day would actually count for the band for release day. And so release week would have all of those pre-order sales. And so they're front loading as many sales as possible so that they would more likely to chart higher on the Billboard Top 200. So that's why people originally did pre-orders. Now, and it still worked with digital. With iTunes pre-orders, the numbers were the same, and it still even works today. But why are we doing it as independent labels? Do we care about SoundScan? Are we trying to chart our records? Why are we doing pre-orders? One of the great reasons that I do pre-orders, so I still do them, and I have a reason for it. The reason I do pre-orders is because I need the cash. When I am about to receive an order of vinyl or to manufacture CDs or tapes, I need cash to spend on that. I need to prepay for those things. I need to give deposits. And so when people pre-order the record, I might get $200 or $300 or $400 or $500 in cash that I can spend now to buy some of this stuff before release date. And so I find that the influx of cash from pre-orders is really helpful. And my really active and dedicated fans will pre-order a record just to show their support. And I appreciate that. Same thing with pre-release singles. Pre-release singles is something that didn't really make sense for independents 10 or 15 years ago. Why were we doing it? Were we sending the songs to radio? Not a lot of us were. But today it makes actually sense for me. I copied that former major record label model for pre-release singles because it actually gives me a chance to have them placed on Spotify playlists and on other people's playlists. And I personally like each song having its own day in the sun because these songs have been toiled over and spent a lot of money recording and a lot of time recording them. And I just don't necessarily want to get them lost in a whole 10-song album. So I want them to be in the album, but I also want them to have their own little spotlight for a day. So I have a plan when it comes to pre-release singles. Why are you doing vinyl? Do you feel like you should be doing vinyl, but do your fans listen to vinyl? Do you have a physical distributor set up? Do you have a plan for how you're going to sell those 300 or 500 copies of vinyl? All I'm saying is have a plan. Don't just copy things because, hey, the bigger labels are doing it, so we should be doing it too. One other thing I should mention is you should ask yourself, what can you do that major labels can't do? What does your agility enable you to do that might be a more involved process for a bigger label? What do you have access to, like your local community, that bigger record labels may not have access to? What are some of your selling points as a record label? Is it your personality? Is it your generosity? These are small things that people might actually be drawn to, and your weaknesses as a small independent record label can become your strengths. Number 4, share your marketing ideas with the record label community. I encourage you to join our Facebook community. It's a private group for independent record labels. You can go to it by going to facebook.otherrecordlabels.com. I've abandoned Facebook a long time ago, but I created a throwaway account just because this group is so fun and we get to share ideas. And it's really important that when you do some of these experiments that we talked about earlier in the episode, you do some of these experiments. If they're really successful for you, share them with the group so that other people can learn from you, and from that newer labels and younger labels can learn from you. And on the other side of the coin, if you've done some things that have cost you a lot of money and were a waste of money and a waste of time and you really regret doing them, share that with the community too. We can all learn from you and learn from our mistakes. Of course, my podcast, Other Record Labels, you can listen to that and you can eavesdrop on some of the great independent record labels, big labels and small labels who have things to teach us. And there's this other idea of starting a community or a collective in your city of a group of record labels. And so maybe if you're in a big city, there's like 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 small labels, and you can get together monthly or quarterly to have some beers and to share your experiences, or make a little group within your genre that from all over the world, and you guys meet once a month or once a quarter on Zoom. And number 5 is to think long-term. Let's end this idea that albums die on release day. And nobody wants that to be true, but for some reason, we comply with it and we abandon our releases on release day. And I get it. I think it's because new things are more exciting, and not just for the public, but even for us. It's easier for us to get excited about something that's coming and something that's brand new. And so when an album is out, we're always on to the next thing. I get that. But let's see if we can start a trend where we no longer put such a heavy emphasis on release day, or even on the lead up to release day, and instead emphasize the long life that albums should and do have. I mean, look at the recent acquisitions of some of the big catalogs from like Tom Petty and Neil Young and Bob Dylan and have the Beatles, I can't remember, but a bunch of these guys have sold their songs. And what's interesting to me is that really shows how evergreen, especially in the streaming world, how evergreen back catalogs are. And so we should start to look at that too, and start to emphasize our albums that have been out for a month or a year or 10 years. So let's create strategies. Let's be really intentional about how we're going to promote our album after release day. For me personally, I actually have a plan in place that I've stuck with the last couple of albums, and I've been really happy with it. And basically, you have release day. And then within a couple of weeks, I like to release a new format. So that could be a lyric book. That could be a format I haven't done, like CD, or maybe the vinyl finally comes in, and so now we're releasing that. So some additional format usually within the first month after release day. The other thing I like to do is I save 1 or 2 B-side singles instead of putting them on the album, and then I will release those 3 to 6 months or 8 months after the albums come out, and those always do really well. I do an instrumental version, so really what I'm doing is I'm exploiting the fixed costs of making an album. So an instrumental version of the album, maybe an artist commentary on the album, and then around the 1-year anniversary, I've been doing an acoustic version of the album as well. Basically, I like to have a 12-month plan for my releases so that on the album's birthday, that's usually when I've stopped the campaign. That's usually when I've put the album to rest and it's now part of our back catalog. So 12 months. So for me, I feel like if I haven't reached the 1-year birthday of this album, then I'm still on the clock. I'm still responsible for promoting this record. I mean, take a look at how you discover music as a music fan. Is it good? Yes or no? Do you like it? Yes or no? It doesn't matter if it's 3 months old or 3 days old or 3 years old or 30 years old. I mean, I listen to records that are 50 years old. I discover new records that are 50 years old. And so music fans are far more relaxed when it comes with the deadline. I know that the press only want to cover new things. I get that. But we have to understand that music listeners, especially in the streaming world, are paying more attention to back catalog items and evergreen albums. And so understand that streaming, apparently 80% of music that's listened to on streaming platforms are back catalog titles, which are technically older than 12 months old. So let's be more conscious about the evergreen nature of some of our records and start to promote that and start to work on that. I hope that you found this helpful. Let's go back over these 5 macro strategies for promoting your record label and your artists and your new releases. Number 1, different artists have different needs. Number 2, keep being creative and enabling creativity. Number 3, don't copy or recycle major label strategies unless you have a really clear objective for why you're doing that. And number 4, share ideas with your record label community. Form a record label community. Be really open and experimental and measure your success and your failures. And number 5, think long term. Albums are more than just release day. They're more than just release week. They can live on for years and decades and maybe centuries. Who knows? If you found all this helpful, you want the notes from today's episode, and you want to download my free marketing checklist that has 25 things that you can do on release day and after release day to promote your new releases, go to otherrecordlabels.com/marketing. Thanks so much for watching.